He pressed record, not just on a camera, but on a moment the world would never forget. Standing in the middle of a crime scene, he created, surrounded by the rotting bodies of the people he had just murdered. Richard McCroskey looked into the lens and said this:
"It's in my final minutes of being alive, and to anybody that finds this, I want you to tell my parents I love them deeply, and I'm very sorry for doing this. To my brother, Sinister, aka Eric, and Emily, I love you guys deeply. I'm sorry for going this route. I know I said I'd turn myself in."
At first glance, he looked broken, confused, a boy who'd made a mistake. But what you're about to hear, what you're about to see, is a lie unraveling in real time. Because that camera didn't capture regret, it captured a calculated monster, trying to sound human. This is not the story of a troubled kid who snapped. This is the story of a young man who rehearsed his darkness in lyrics, plotted it online, and when his fantasy was finally within reach, decided he'd rather destroy it than live without control. Richard Alden Samuel McCroskey III was born in California, December 26, 1988. By 20 years old, his life had already started to slip through the cracks. His parents were recently separated. He dropped out of not one, but 2 high schools, bullied for being overweight, called names for his red hair. He didn't fit in, and the world never let him forget it. So he found comfort in chaos. He poured himself into horrorcore, a dark subgenre of underground rap obsessed with death, gore, and violence. He called himself Seiko Sam, and sometimes Lil Demon Dog. He wasn't pretending, he was rehearsing. On MySpace, he posted lyrics that talked about killing people, smashing skulls, mutilation. His videos were disturbing, his artwork even worse, covered in blood, demons, weapons, and serial killers. But nobody reported him. He had all the signs, and no one said a word. That all changed when he met a girl named Emma Niederbrock. She was 4 years younger than Richard, a 15-year-old homeschooled teenager from Farmville, Virginia. Sweet, sheltered, but rebellious. She dyed her hair pink, dressed in all black, wore heavy makeup. Just like Richard, she was obsessed with horrorcore music and the dark, occult world that came with it. They never met in person, at least not right away, but they sent videos, swapped music, called each other baby. Emma even posted online, "Next time you check your MySpace, you'll be at my house. I love you so, so much, baby. Forever. And for always." To Richard, that meant everything. He thought he had a girlfriend. He thought they were in love. What he didn't realize is that online fantasies don't always survive the real world. In September 2009, Emma, her best friend Melanie, and Richard made plans to attend a horrorcore festival called Strictly for the Wicked, hosted in Michigan. The only way Emma's parents, Mark and Deborah, agreed to let her go was if Richard flew in from California to stay with them first. Yes, you heard that right. They let a 20-year-old man, who'd never met their daughter before, live in their house for days. On September 6, Richard landed in Virginia. Emma met him at the airport, but when she saw him in person, the magic disappeared. His greasy red hair, his awkwardness, his clothes. He didn't look like the edgy internet rapper she'd built up in her head. He just looked like a kid trying too hard. And by the time they hit the road for the festival, Emma was already pulling away. She didn't want to sit next to him. She barely spoke to him. And at the concert, she flirted with other guys, right in front of him. That's when Richard started to break. He had left his home, spent money he didn't have, to be with a girl who had already moved on. By the time they got back to Farmville, he wasn't just hurt, he was humiliated.
A guilty plea from an aspiring rapper who killed 4 people in Central Virginia. Richard Sam McCroskey was sentenced to life in prison as part of the plea. He killed his girlfriend, her parents, and a friend in Farmville, Virginia. McCroskey was from California and embraced horror-themed lyrics. A prosecutor said the women were bludgeoned to death with a wood-splitting tool while they slept on September 18, 2009. The father, a Presbyterian minister, was killed with the tool when he came to check on the family members. Lee Powell, The Associated Press.
But it didn't happen right away. The murders didn't start the night they came home. Richard waited, he watched, he lived in that house for days, watching Emma ignore him, watching her friend Melanie laugh, until he just couldn't take it anymore. On the night of September 15, 2009, while the house slept, Richard picked up a ball-peen hammer. He walked toward Melanie first, and what happened next left a stain on that house, and on this country, that would take years to fully understand. The room was quiet, no screams, no warnings, just the dull thud of metal hitting flesh. Melanie Wells was asleep on the couch. She never even had a chance to wake up. Richard stood over her body, hammer in hand, breathing heavy. He wasn't finished. Next he crept upstairs. Emma's mother, Dr. Deborah Kelly, a respected professor of criminal justice, was asleep in her bed. She didn't hear him coming either. By the time Richard walked back downstairs, 2 women were dead. He moved toward Emma's room. She was the reason for all of this. At least, in his mind. She didn't love him. She didn't want him. So he stood in her doorway, stared at her sleeping form, one last time, and swung. 3 bodies, 1 man, 1 hammer. Richard didn't run. He didn't cry. He didn't confess. He just stayed. He walked around that house for days, with 3 decomposing corpses lying inside. He even used the phone. He answered calls from Melanie's family, gave vague excuses, said she was at the movies with Emma, told someone she was out with Deborah. Nobody knew, not yet, that all 3 women were already dead. Then came Mark Niederbrock, Emma's dad, a pastor, concerned that nobody had heard from his daughter or his ex-wife. He drove over to the house on September 17th, hoping everything was fine. Richard was still there. When Mark walked in, Richard grabbed a new weapon, a wood-splitting maul, heavier, deadlier, and then he beat the 50-year-old pastor to death.
A prosecutor said the women were bludgeoned to death with a wood-splitting tool while they slept on September 18, 2009. The father, a Presbyterian minister, was killed with the tool when he came to check on the family members. Lee Powell, The Associated Press.
Richard was now surrounded by 4 bodies. So what did he do? He cleaned up. He dragged Melanie and Mark's bodies into Emma's room, stacking them beside her like trash. On September 18th, Richard decided it was time to disappear. He stole Mark's car, packed his things, and drove. He didn't get far. Around 4 a.m. that morning, police found the car stuck in a ditch, and Richard standing beside it, looking calm, quiet, just another guy who ran off the road. When asked who the car belonged to, he said, "My girlfriend's dad." Nobody questioned it. The police had no idea he had just killed that man. Less than 24 hours earlier, they gave him a citation and let him go. This was the second time Richard had contact with police, and both times, they let him walk away. The first was during a welfare check, earlier that week, when officers came to Emma's home after Melanie's mum grew suspicious. Richard had answered the door himself, calm, friendly, even claiming to be Emma's boyfriend. He told the officers they had gone to the movies, so they left, never checked the house, never smelled the bodies, but Kathleen Wells, Melanie's mum, wasn't buying it. Something felt off. She kept calling.
Yes, I don't know who I need to talk to, or my daughter is with a family in Farmville, Virginia, and she's been basically missing for the past 2.5 days. I can't get a hold of her. Her cell phone's turned off. What's worse is the girl that she was staying with, nobody knows where she is. Her cell phone is turned off. His daughter's boyfriend is staying there, and I've talked to him several times today, and I've gotten different stories from him. But my husband went down. He was supposed to pick up my daughter yesterday, and he went down there, and he arrived at about 11 o'clock in the morning. He sat there for 8 hours outside the house. Nobody showed up. Nobody answered the door. Yeah, I mean, we're about 4 hours away here, and I don't know what else to do.
She even called the festival organizer, who confirmed that yes, Melanie had returned to Virginia, but she had never made it home. So on the afternoon of September 18th, just hours after Richard got stuck in the ditch, police finally went back to the house. When they arrived, the front door was locked, but Richard was gone, and then the smell hit them. It wasn't a broken pipe, it wasn't a dead animal, it was the smell of death. Rotting flesh, so thick, it clung to your throat. Inside, they found the truth, not just about Richard, but about what happens when red flags are ignored and evil is left unchecked. Death had taken over that home. The stench hit the officers like a wave, thick, sour, and rotting. It was everywhere, soaked into the air, the carpet, the walls. They moved fast, and then they saw it. In the downstairs bedroom, they found a horrific scene, a tangle of lifeless bodies. Blood dried into the carpet, pooling beneath limbs and faces once full of life. Emma Niederbrock, just 16 years old, Melanie Wells, 18, Mark Niederbrock, 50, all three, bludgeoned beyond recognition. Upstairs, in a separate room, was the fourth victim, Dr. Deborah Kelly, Emma's mother, a scholar, a teacher, a woman whose expertise was in criminal justice, now the victim of the kind of crime she once lectured about. This wasn't just murder, this was rage, blunt force trauma to the face and head, no mercy, no hesitation. The medical examiner wouldn't even describe the wounds in public. By now the question was obvious, where was Richard McCroskey?
It's in my final minutes of being alive, and to anybody that finds this, I want you to tell my parents I love them deeply, and I'm very sorry for doing this.
He wasn't sorry, he was running. With the bodies discovered, and the horror now confirmed, police launched a full-blown manhunt. They started combing through Emma and Melanie's social media. One name kept showing up, and one officer remembered a conversation, just days earlier, with a red-haired boy claiming to be Emma's boyfriend. It was him. Just one day after the bodies were found, police tracked him to Richmond International Airport. He wasn't boarding a flight. He wasn't hiding. He was asleep, curled up on the floor, near the baggage claim area. Police arrested Richard Alden, Samuel McCroskey III, after they found him sleeping in Richmond's airport. Once in custody, Richard didn't fight. He admitted everything. He told detectives he'd acted out of rejection, anger, jealousy. He claimed his mind snapped, but the reality was clear. He planned this, lived in the aftermath, lied to authorities, recorded himself, and showed no remorse. He was charged with robbery, grand theft, and 6 counts of first-degree murder, though 4 were publicly emphasized. He pleaded guilty and received life in prison, without the possibility of parole. This wasn't just the story of one broken boy. It was a story about blind spots, about parents who wanted to trust, friends who didn't press hard enough, and a system that let a murderer talk his way past police encounters. It's about obsession, entitlement, fantasy, and how one man, armed with a hammer, a maul, and a microphone, turned heartbreak into homicide. His final words weren't for his victims. They weren't even for the families he shattered. They were for the world he hated.
Which is gonna be over there, if you can see that. I'm not gonna tell you what I'm gonna do, because I'm sure you guys know what I'm gonna do. I'm really sorry, but it came to this. But I'm gonna get going and do what I gotta do. I'm gonna pay my consequences. So my last words before I go, it's the world.
This is Murder We Heard TV. If you found value in this conversations, if it made you think, made you feel something, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories that pull back the curtain on crimes you'll never forget. Because these aren't just cases, they're warnings, and sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones who feel invisible.